Hi, we are here with our climate change team, and we are going to discuss all things climate change with three of our researchers, Farah, Lily, and Logan. And we're going to learn about how climate change impacts fish and wildlife and their habitats all throughout Florida. Hi, Farah, how are you?
Great, how are you?
Good.
My name is Farah Ilami, and I'm the Coastal Planning Coordinator for FWC, and I am based out of Lake City, Florida.
Hi, I'm Lily Swanbrow-Becker, Climate Change Adaptation Training Coordinator based in Tallahassee.
Hi, my name is Logan Benedict. I am a climate adaptation biologist, and I'm based out of Gainesville, Florida.
So climate change, it's a very big topic, and a lot of people ask, how does this affect me and my community? So how does climate change specifically impact Florida? What are we seeing in Florida?
Yeah, so unfortunately, we're already seeing the impacts of climate change here in Florida. Things like sea level rise, increased flooding along the coast, warmer temperatures, and frequent and severe storm events are already impacting our communities in the state. Unfortunately, again, we expect these impacts only to continue and even accelerate in the coming years and beyond. And the irony is that many of the things that make Florida such a wonderful place to live are the same things that make it extremely vulnerable to climate change. So you may know that Florida has a lot of coastline. We have 1,400 miles of coastline in the state, which makes it extremely vulnerable to sea level rise. And in fact, we've already seen 3 inches of sea level rise in parts of Florida and can expect up to 10 inches by 2030. Now, it's easy to focus on how these changes are impacting human communities across the state. They're also threatening fish and wildlife and their habitats. So here at FWRI, our focus is really on understanding how climate change is going to impact Florida's fish and wildlife and working on strategies to help these animals and our natural systems adapt.
So one of the main indicators of climate change is sea level rise. What species and habitats are impacted by sea level rise specifically in Florida?
Well, as sea levels rise, the available space for sea turtles to come ashore and nest, and also for beach mice to live and feed in the dunes, well, that space will get squeezed between the water and any structures placed further up the shore. And in addition, salt marshes will get inundated with salt water, impacting birds such as the black rail, and also mammals such as the Florida salt marsh vole.
What is FWC doing to address some of these impacts of climate change on fish and wildlife?
Well, one way is through living shorelines. So living shorelines are softer, greener alternatives to seawalls and bulkheads, and they help reduce erosion and they also protect habitat, among other benefits. So FWC is promoting the use of living shorelines through its contractor training program to increase the pool of professionals who can install them.
So Florida shorebirds rely on Florida's beaches for nesting and feeding, and these habitats are highly vulnerable to sea level rise due to inundation and erosion. So we at FWRI are looking at creative solutions to address the impacts of sea level rise on these beach nesting birds. We're trying to come up with creative solutions to do so. For example, right now we're working on implementing beach nesting platforms for least terns and black skimmers that provides their necessary habitat and nesting materials while still being well above sea level rise.
So areas like the Florida Keys, those small, low-level areas, what is FWC doing to look at those areas?
So the Florida Keys are some of the lowest lying places in the United States, and the average elevation in the Florida Keys is around 4.5 feet. This puts the wildlife of the Keys at particularly high risk from sea level rise. Additionally, fresh water is a rare resource on these islands, and as little as 1 foot of sea level rise could cut the amount of fresh water available in half.
So what about temperature changes? One aspect of climate is temperature over time. What can you tell us about how the temperature is changing?
Yeah, that's a good point. So often when people think about climate change, they do think about sea level rise, but rarely do we discuss the impacts of temperature on Florida's wildlife. So in Florida's future, we expect to see a continued trend of increased average air temperatures. This will mean reduced number of freezing events and increased record highs in the state of Florida. While fewer cold days may seem nice to some of us, it can also be helpful to invasive species like the iguana, the Burmese python, or the Brazilian pepper plant. These non-native species are able to march further north than they already exist as temperatures continue to increase and freezes are reduced. So changes in temperature will also lead to many native plants and animals shifting their ranges. For example, the mangrove plants and snook. Warmer winters will mean that mangrove forest habitat will slowly move northward, and the snook will probably follow that habitat as well. This could eventually mean new fishing opportunities in the Big Bend and the Panhandle, and it's also worth noting that saltwater anglers are already catching snook at further north locations than they have in the recent past.
Water temperatures, how does that impact our flora and fauna?
Well, water temperature changes will affect sessile, meaning non-mobile marine species, such as corals and sponges. It'll cause loss due to bleaching and disease, as well as impacts to mobile species. In addition, changes in ocean water chemistry will cause many of the shell-producing species to either partially or completely dissolve, including tiny plankton that form the base of the food web and produce most of the oxygen that we breathe. So FWC is working with other scientists and volunteers to grow corals and sponges in nurseries and then plant them in areas where they can thrive.
What about changes in rainfall?
It's expected that some areas of Florida will get wetter and others drier. This is because changes to ocean currents from additional energy in the form of trapped radiation are often accompanied by changes in seasonal weather patterns. So many species are dependent upon rain occurring at a certain time of the year to initiate breeding or to find places for feeding. So timing of rainfall is very important. So one of the things we're doing is in North Florida, managers have installed pond liners to small temporary wetlands. These areas are critical breeding habitat for species including salamanders, newts, and frogs. The pond liners are being tested to see if they can help maintain more natural water levels during critical times of year.
So we've talked a little bit about how climate change is impacting Florida and what we learned from these projects studying climate change. How else is FWC addressing climate change?
So we've been working for over a decade actually to build an infrastructure both within the agency and beyond through establishing a network of partners across the state and region that's helping us work toward creative and collaborative responses to climate change. A lot of this is partnership building on projects and assessing vulnerability of species and habitats, but some of it is also about sharing information. So we strongly believe that there's a role in this challenge for everyone. And along those lines, many of our efforts to date have been focused on building capacity through providing training, setting up great communication channels, and creating really streamlined resources and access to information for everyone. Along those lines, I want to share a really great tool that we've been working on to help the public and other researchers learn more about the impacts of climate change on Florida fish and wildlife and adaptation strategies. So I believe you're seeing my screen. This is the Climate Adaptation Explorer, a new tool that is publicly accessible to anybody. And you can see the URL, climateadaptationexplorer.org. It is a tool that is designed to showcase a ton of information about impacts of climate change, adaptation strategies, and beyond. And it's designed to be accessible at a lot of different levels. So for somebody, maybe you're a teacher or just an interested person in the public who's not working on this topic professionally, there's a lot of general information with multiple opportunities to dig in and explore. And there's also some really specific, detailed information that our researchers and biologists and partners can use to learn more about climate change. So up at the top of the tool, you can see it's separated by impacts, species, habitats, and adaptation strategies. You can look at a lot of different things in the Climate Adaptation Explorer. Under impacts, you can understand more about general impacts, as well as impacts on Florida. And I just want to show one neat little thing here. If you go to impacts and look at sea level rise, we actually have an interactive sea level rise map included in this tool. So you can click on it and then zoom in to see how sea level rise is impacting wherever you live in the state. We can see what Logan was referring to earlier with the really low-lying areas around South Florida and the Keys, that much of that location is going to be impacted by 1 meter in the dark blue and 3 meters in the light blue of sea level rise. Another great feature of this tool is the section focused on species. We have profiles here for 138 species in Florida, and you can sort them based on their taxonomic group. I'm going to select birds. You can also sort them by vulnerability level, which is color coded. And I can see here that there's 9 species of birds that are either highly or very highly or highly vulnerable to sea level rise. Just picking one, the Florida scrub jay. This is a great critter that some of you might know is very threatened and is endemic to Florida. And you can find information here about the scrub jay, its habitat requirements. Many of our species have an interactive sea level rise habitat map. So you can look here and see this guy has a very small patch of habitat, and luckily most of it is inland, so not a lot of it is impacted by sea level rise. But similar to the general map, we can see how sea level rise impacts species habitat. And all of the species are linked to their habitat. So I can look at hardwood forested uplands and learn more about that habitat and how it's impacted by climate change and all of the other species that live there. And then finally, there's adaptation strategies, which is where you can go to find solutions, both for biologists to focus on and a lot of what we're doing for species and habitats in Florida, as well as some things that maybe even the public can get involved in to help out with this big problem.
Wow, that is such a great comprehensive resource to learn about all things climate change related to Florida's habitat and species.
Yeah, thank you. We really hope that it's a great resource, not just for people working in conservation, but for everybody to learn more about what's going on and how climate change is impacting your favorite Florida critters and their habitats. And really, there's a role for everybody to look in your backyard and take actions to help these animals and their ecosystems survive and thrive in a changing future.
In addition to that, there's also opportunities for the public to get involved in helping build living shorelines. So in order to do that, the best thing to do is to contact your local volunteer coordinator with FWC and find out what opportunities are available.
Well, thanks so much for chatting with us today about climate change. We learned a lot, and we know that there are a lot of available resources and opportunities to get involved and help out in our local communities. Thanks so much, and we will talk to you again soon.